It's the dead of winter, 1944. The countryside of occupied Poland looked like a place frozen in time and fear. The air burns with cold. The world feels gray, silent, and afraid. Snow covers the broken streets. German soldiers march past burned-out homes. Every door is shut, every curtain drawn. Inside one quiet house at the edge of town, a young woman moves, carefully polishing silver, serving tea, pretending not to exist. Her name is Irene Gut. To the soldiers she serves, she's just another maid, obedient, polite, and invisible. But under the floorboards, hidden beneath her feet, 12 people are breathing in the dark. Jewish families, mothers, fathers, children. If the soldiers ever find them, they'll all be executed, no questions asked, and Irene will die with them. This is not a story about guns or glory. It's about mercy, courage, and the quiet war fought behind closed doors. Before the world turned upside down, Irene dreamed of becoming a nurse. She was born in 1918 in a small Polish town called Kozienice, one of 5 sisters. Her childhood was ordinary: school, friends, a loving home. She liked sewing, music, and dancing at local festivals. When war came in 1939, everything stopped. German bombs fell from the sky. Cities crumbled. Refugees fled through streets filled with smoke and blood. Irene was only 21. She tried to help working in a hospital, caring for the wounded, believing the war would end quickly. But Poland was crushed between 2 powers, the Nazis from the west and the Soviets from the east. Hospitals closed, soldiers occupied towns, and civilians were herded like cattle. She was captured, assaulted, and eventually forced into labor for the German army. By her early 20s, she was assigned to work for a high-ranking officer, Major Eduard Rajima, in a villa just outside the city of Tarnopol. On paper, she was his housekeeper. In reality, she was surrounded by men who destroyed her country. She served their meals, cleaned their boots, smiled when they spoke, and hated every moment of it. But Irene was observant. She listened. She learned how they thought, when they patrolled, and which ones were careless with their words. Outside, she saw things that changed her forever. Children herded into trucks, old men shot in the snow, families vanishing overnight. Each time she looked away, guilt burned hotter. She told herself, if I can't fight, maybe I can help. That single thought would define her entire war. It started small. One evening, a young Jewish woman Irene knew came to her door, shaking with fear. Her parents had been taken. She had nowhere to go. Irene hid her for one night. Just until morning, she thought. But morning came, and she couldn't send her away. Then another person needed help. Then another. By winter, she was secretly feeding and sheltering a small group of Jews, hiding in the forests outside town. She risked her life with every trip, carrying scraps of bread, whispering directions, lying when soldiers questioned her. Her nerves were steel by then, but as raids increased, the forests grew too dangerous. So Irene made a decision most people would call madness. She brought them inside, into the villa owned by the German officer she worked for. She led them through a trapdoor into a crawl space beneath the floor. It was cramped and airless, with only a small vent for air. She covered it with planks and furniture, making it look like solid floor. Then she went back upstairs, fixed her apron, and served dinner to German soldiers, while 12 people hid beneath her feet. Every sound mattered. Every creak of a floorboard could mean death. During the day, Irene cleaned and served as usual. At night, she waited until the soldiers slept, then snuck food and water down through the floor. The hidden ones whispered thanks, but she silenced them quickly. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just stay alive." For months, the routine held. Irene became an actress, smiling, laughing, pretending loyalty while her heart pounded every minute. But then came the night everything nearly collapsed. It was late December. Snow fell heavy, blanketing the villa. The officers were drinking and singing in the dining hall when the sound of engines echoed outside. Black cars. The Gestapo. Irene froze. She felt her hands go cold, her breath shallow. Major Gemma opened the door as the officers announced a routine inspection. They entered, boots thudding against the floorboards. Irene's heart hammered. She poured tea, pretending calm. Her hands trembled so badly, the cups clinked on the tray. The Gestapo officers searched the house, closets, cupboards, cellars. Every footstep upstairs was a prayer downstairs. Under the floor, the hidden families pressed their hands to their mouths, trying not to cry. An officer walked to the spot above them. He tapped his boot. The hollow echo made him pause. Irene's mouth went dry. He looked at her. "Rats," she said, forcing a small laugh. "They get under the floors sometimes." The officer smirked and said you should set traps. He turned away when the trucks finally drove off. Irene collapsed against the kitchen wall, shaking so hard she could barely stand. Her smile had saved them. That night she didn't sleep. She sat by the stove, staring into the flames, realizing just how thin the line between life and death had become. The months that followed were a blur of fear and discipline. Irene woke before dawn, cooked, cleaned, served, smiled, while listening to 12 heartbeats below her feet. Sometimes the officer would bring guests, and she would have to entertain them, serving wine while laughter echoed through the house. Each time, she prayed none of them dropped anything that rolled toward the hidden floor. The people beneath stayed completely still during the day. They whispered only at night, when she came down to check on them. To them, she was more than a rescuer. She was hope. But to Irene, she was just doing what had to be done. "I couldn't let them die," she later said. "I had the power to help, so I did." Onto the children became sick, feverish and weak. Irene stole medicine from the officer's cabinet and slipped it under the floor, praying he wouldn't notice. He never did. But the danger grew sharper. Food was scarce. Soldiers were suspicious, and Irene knew it couldn't last forever. In the spring of 1944, she overheard something that made her blood run cold. German officers were talking about cleaning out the remaining Jews in the area, a final sweep before retreat. That night, Irene went to the trapdoor and whispered, "They're coming. We leave tomorrow." The group stared at her, scared, exhausted but ready. Before dawn, they crept out of the villa one by one. Snow had melted, leaving the forest muddy and silent. Irene led them through the woods, guiding them with nothing but moonlight and instinct. For hours they walked avoiding patrols, hiding in ditches, shivering under trees when dogs barked in the distance. Finally, they reached an abandoned farmhouse deep in the forest. It had no windows left, no heat, but it was shelter. Irene brought food, blankets, and promised to return. And she did again and again, until liberation came. 12 people, mothers, fathers, children survived because of her. All because one woman refused to walk away. When the war ended in 1945, Poland was unrecognizable. Cities were rubble. Millions were gone. Irene was alive, but she carried ghosts. She had lost family members, friends, and pieces of herself she could never reclaim. The people she saved left for new lives, some to Israel, others to America. Irene eventually moved to the United States too, hoping to start over. She found work, married, changed her last name to Irene Updike, and stayed silent for decades. She didn't tell her story, not because she was ashamed, but because she thought no one would believe her. How could they? A 20-something nurse saving 12 people right under the Nazis' noses sounded like a movie. But history caught up. In the 1970s, survivors who had known her began telling her story publicly. Irene finally stepped forward, not for attention, but because she felt responsible. She said the world was forgetting what silence can do. In 1982, she was honored by Yad Vashem as one of the righteous among the nations, a recognition given to non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. When a reporter asked why she did it, Irene said, "You can always say I didn't know, but once you know, you can't just walk away. No speeches, no tears. Just truth." She wasn't fearless. She was terrified every day. But she acted anyway. That, she said, is what courage really is. War stories often focus on battles, victories, and generals. But Irene's story reminds us that heroism can live in the quietest acts, in compassion disguised as obedience, in resistance hidden beneath a smile. She didn't have a weapon, an army, or orders. She had only conscience and the belief that one person could still make a difference. While others looked away, she stepped forward. While others followed rules, she broke them. Her war wasn't fought with bullets. It was fought with lies told to killers and meals served with shaking hands. Because courage is not about being unafraid. It's about choosing to do good, even when you're terrified. Irene Gut showed that in the darkest years of humanity, mercy still survived. Under the floor of a Nazi officer's home, 12 people lived because one young woman decided to care. When she looked back years later, she didn't call herself a hero. She said simply, "I did what I had to do." Maybe that's what real heroism is, not grand gestures, but small, relentless choices to do what's right. In the chaos of war, when the world demanded silence, Irene Gut chose to listen to her heart instead. And because she did, 12 lives went on to see peace. When we talk about the heroes of World War II, we think of soldiers and leaders, people with medals, weapons, and power. But maybe the real victory belongs to those who had none of those things. People like Irene Gut, who smiled at monsters, lied to save lives, and fought evil with compassion. Because sometimes the bravest act in war isn't fighting, it's saving.